baby, that's a lot.
I want to do a little. This will probably be where we end it. So we've been talking about characters we've played and situations we've been in and seen work or not work and how we make a character sort of successful or how we feel about it, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to do a case study from the outside. And because we have to talk about it. We're going to talk about Critical Role a little bit here.
Okay.
Because I think Critical Role has two very good examples of how to make a really successful character and a really unsuccessful character.
Interesting. Okay.
Do you know who I'm going to bring up? I'm curious.
So
we're talking campaign 1, obviously, because that's the only one I've watched.
Okay. Campaign 1. I'm going to go off on a limb and say Percy for successful, Grog for unsuccessful.
Fucking got it in 1.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So let's talk about the Percy versus Grog situation. So spoilers, I guess, but I don't know how long we're going to go on for this if you haven't seen season 1 of Critical Role, so I can't give you like a timestamp here, but I'm going to talk about everything's on the table because me and Isaiah both finished Critical Role campaign 1, so we're talking about everything. So yeah, Percy. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are under the general impression that Percy had a really good, crazy, cool arc and was really interesting and like concluded really well. And I think a lot of people generally with campaign 1 feel like Grog was, it was fine, right? And
yeah, go on, because I do have some points about Grog that I do want to bring up.
Okay, so the thing for me is like, why did it happen the way it is, right? Because obviously Matt Mercer's a good, as we said, we're predicating this situation, assuming the GM is cooperating. And in the Critical Role example, Matt Mercer very much did cooperate with the players' backstories, right? Like pretty much everyone got some sort of backstory, something or other. And if it wasn't a backstory thing, they sort of went somewhere interesting, right? Like Scanlan didn't have much backstory, but he went somewhere interesting. His daughter showed up. He left the group for a while. He came back a different kind of character, right? So like he went somewhere, and then like Vex and Vax had a very like straightforward backstory. But as I said before, right, they were kind of open to the pivot. And they pivoted into some interesting places, right? Vax becoming a paladin and the Raven Queen shit. And then, Vexalia becoming this sort of like pseudo queen of Whitestone. There was some good, like, yes, I'm picking up what you're putting down for me, GM. I will take it. Thank you. Thank you for the sweet, sweet morsels. Delicious. The Grog situation, however, just the thing with Grog is he just kind of didn't really go anywhere. Like Grog started, I'm Angie man who, is rude and drinks, and I punch and like violence. And he basically ended the same. The only difference with Grog was I like my friends more now, and I'm a little more restrained when they tell me to be, But for the most part, he was still Angie man who punch and hurt things and like violence and like women and, right? Like,
so I see what you're saying. I'm going to counter it with a very good, obviously I'm not going to play the clip, but it's that bit towards the end of the campaign. And it's the one where they're doing the Halloween episode and Travis is dressed like Delilah. Not like Delilah, like Silas. And he has this great moment where Keyleth basically asks him, like, how do you deal with your anger? And he goes through this great thing where he's like, well, getting angry is easy and it's fun, and I can break, I can hit shit, break stuff. But if I fly off the handle, the people I care about, my family, they get hurt or they are endangered in some way, and that's not acceptable to me. So, and he basically tells Keyleth, like, take that anger, hold it in, control it, and then in the moment when you're ready to let it loose, let it all out. Let it out like a fucking explosion. And then he literally says, and I'll be there with you, and then I'll high five you when it's done. So, like, he had this crazy adult conversation that, like, up until that point, did not really seem capable of. But Grog having the like metacognition to be like, I use my anger as a tool as opposed to I just fly off the handle when I get mad. That showed a lot of growth. Now I will give you, that's very subtle growth. That's not like, he does not experience a what's it called? A paradigm shift, right? Like there's no massive flux to his character.
Yeah.
But in some ways, I would argue the subtle change is almost just as powerful as Percy's like I'm not a monster thing.
So
it's just what you have. It's powerful because there was so much to work with and how much it affected the simplicity, you know?
Yeah, so like yes and no. You're not necessarily wrong on the subtle part. However, that I don't think was necessarily a change or a growth. I think stuff like that was like, Grog's always been that way. We're just learning about what's in it. Like, we're just learning about what's on the inside of his head, you know? Like, I think he's always kind of been that way. I don't think he really shifted much. It was just, oh, we got to learn a little tidbit that we didn't have before. That's what that scene felt like for me, if I'm remembering it correctly, you know?
Okay.
But, so the thing with Grog is Travis played Grog fine. I don't think that was the problem. You're right. Grog has good moments. There's good scenes. He has parts where he sort of, I mean, the whole bit with the sort of cast being like, yeah, we're just gonna fucking, don't you want to just go ape shit? And Grog just being like, guys, the sword's kind of evil. And everyone's like, what? Are you gonna keep using it? And he's like, it's a really good sword though, guys. Like, right? Like, he has great moments and he has good scenes. I mean, that whole bit was fantastic. And I do like Grog. This is the thing I want to point out. I don't dislike Grog. He's not my favorite character in the Critical Role cast, but I don't dislike Grog, right? So like, this is not me saying he's a shit character, but in the way that we've been talking about a successful versus unsuccessful character, the thing is, I think it really comes down to Grog did not have a goal. That was problem number one, right? He didn't really have a goal in the way everyone else did, right? And his backstory, which was the one kind of goal he had, was so straightforward and so easily resolved that once it was done, it was kind of like, okay, Grog's done. Like, Grog's just here now, right? Like, once he killed his uncle, right? Because Grog's whole backstory, revenge on my uncle, was like his main goal. Once he did that, he just felt like, okay, I did the thing. That's it. Like, he had no big, heavy, he had no higher level goal, right? Whereas Percy also achieved his goal, and Percy achieved his goal first, right? Like, arguably before any other character, unless I'm forgetting something, but I don't think, right? Like,
no, yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. Percy achieved his goal first. And obviously the Briarwood arc is like, it's probably the best part of Critical Role, which is why it was what got turned into the animated show. That is, you know, it's slightly unfair because it does seem like Matt Mercer was a little more hyped about Percy's backstory, so he did give it a little bit more. He gave it more love and attention than the Kevdak situation, right?
Yeah.
But even that part being said, the thing that I think is really important about Percy is he gets his goal, he does his thing, he has the big change of like, I'm a monster to like, okay, like I am kind of a piece of shit, but maybe I can sort of like fix it, and everyone's telling me I'm not that much of a monster, so maybe I can figure this out. But once he achieves his goal and defeats the Briarwoods, he thinks he achieves his goal, I suppose, and defeats the Briarwoods, it's like, he then goes, okay, I now have a new higher level goal, which is like, how do I make up for my fuckery, right? How do I make up for the shit that I pulled? How do I make up for the fact that I fucked up, right? And there was still, what's her name? Ripley was still out there, but he was kind of like, yeah, she's still out there, but because I understand the position I'm in, I'm not going to chase her like a psychopath because that's not a reasonable thing for me to do right now. I know she's still out there, but I'm going to focus on my town and like helping everyone and like getting this shit back, you know, fixing this situation. Whereas when Grog beat Kevdak, it was just like, yep, beat Kevdak. Let's go get a beer, guys, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is, one, it's the backstory, right? Percy had a more compelling backstory kind of from the get-go, so Matt Mercer was more interested in playing it out more. And two, once the backstory is completed, Percy then shifted to a new goal, and Grog didn't really. He just was kind of there. And then his goal became the party goal of, well, we got to stop the dragons and we got to stop Vecna, right? He just sort of adopted that, which is fine. And again, if you want to play this way, you can still have, again, this whole conversation. This is not about whether a character's fun or not fun to play, right? Like, it's about like a character who feels like a successful, like, character with a full arc and a full story to them or not. You can have fun playing the Grog character whose only goal is to do whatever the fuck the party is. You can totally have fun doing that. But if you were, let's put it this way, if you're reading a book and Grog was the main character, you'd be like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
you'd feel really weird if by the end of the story you're like, wait, why did the main character not really do anything?
Yeah.
Like, he was there for the fight, but he didn't feel like he had a reason. He was just there helping his homies. So, probably if Grog was the main character of the book, the main character would have shifted after the Kev deck part, right? You would get a new main character at that point.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, I don't know. Am I off base in my like looking at it from the outside situation?
No, I don't think I don't think you're off base, but
am I being too harsh?
Maybe. Yeah, because I think for what it was, I do still think that Grog was pretty successful, because even if that was, even if his whole speech was something that he was already aware of himself, like that wasn't like a realization he had come to, even with that in mind, that's still growth. That's still growth from the viewer's perspective, right?
Sure.
We now know something about him. He has shifted in a way that we did not expect. I would argue that a character who, to me, probably shifted the least was Pike. Which is no real fault of Ashley's, because she wasn't there for a lot of it. She had like to work.
That's true. You may have a point there.
So, Pike changed in some ways, like she sort of found her faith again. Like, spoiler alert, the degree to which she lost her faith in Legend of Vox Machina is way more relevant than it was in the game.
For sure, yeah.
In the game, she executes a dude kind of brutally, and Saren Ray's like, that's not too cool there, Chief.
Yeah.
I'm going to take my powers back for a few days. And it really is that. It's like maybe a session where she doesn't have her miracles, but she still is a Chungus, right? Like, she still has her base of disruption. She still has her magic shield. She still has her plate armor. So she's like, okay, well, I'm just not going to heal for a few sessions. I'm just going to start clobbering people to death. So, I think Pike, now that I thought about it, was probably the one who probably was the least fulfilling to watch, at least. Which, again, no fault of the character or the player, just sort of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, my one counter with Pike, I will say, though, is I feel like Pike got to achieve some pretty grandiose shit. She did, Pike got to be like the fucking
champion of Saren Ray.
Yeah, like Saren Ray's like right hand homie, and the whole like getting the gods to cooperate with everyone was a lot of like Pike being like, well, maybe Saren Ray could tell us a good idea of how we can fight Vecna, right? So she got to do some pretty grandiose shit, whereas I feel like Grog didn't, Like, he just kind of, which is, I guess, maybe that's the whole Marshall Caster disparity problem, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
right? Like, there's definitely some of that going on.
It do be a bitch.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, and again, I still love Grog. Like, it's not a me being like he wasn't fun to watch, but if I look at him from an objective, like as if he were the main character of a book, like a writing standpoint, he feels sort of unsuccessful because he sort of peters out early and then doesn't find a new thing, whereas Percy wraps his shit up and then shifts to a new thing that is just as interesting and just as compelling, even though Percy kind of takes a back seat, right? Like in the second half of the campaign, Percy sort of shifts, like obviously the Briarwood arc, he was the central focus. He sort of shifts and becomes less of a focus and is like, I'm going to like help everyone out, but it's not about me anymore. Which is, I really just Taliesin playing the character. Like, Taliesin being a good player is what that is. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, was the really, interesting thing. Because it's not like, it's not like after the Briarwood arc, Percy was just crying all the time about, oh, how horrible my life is, and oh, I'm awful, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you did that already, bro. Like, you're getting your shit back together. You're, like, figuring it out. And then it came up a little bit again when they had fought Ripley. And the what's his name? That kid was there. Like the kid who got the Simon belt.
Yeah. Kynan?
Yeah. There was him, and when he was up, Percy kind of went back into like, oh fuck man, I'm a piece of shit. This is my fault. But like it was reasonably quick. And then it was like, all right, back to what, we gotta stay on task. So yeah, I don't have any sort of grandiose point, but I think Grog and Percy are interesting case studies of like successful versus unsuccessful character, and I think there's sort of a couple of factors that sort of, I think it's the way they handled their backstories, and then the way their character pivoted once their backstory finished or sort of wrapped for the most part, and then also the way they sort of decided on a goal or a path afterward, and I mean, even